Bitter criticism, reading something else from, I don't remember, let's read again, Cgtn. Let's read again, Cgtn, the top 5 from the highlights. The first news says, I bet the first and second news will be about institutional news, about formal politics, like politics. July 24. President Xi calls for China-EU cooperation to provide more stability, certainty for world. Huge news. I'm not sure if I'm going to make this, because 5 minutes reading. I'm going to make 10 minutes. July 24, 2025. Chinese President Xi Jinping at center shakes hands with President of the European Council Antonio Costa and President of the European Commission Ursula von der Leyen. Shaking fast. Chinese President Xi Jinping said on Thursday that China and the European Union (EU) are both constructive forces for multilateralism, openness and cooperation, calling on both sides to provide more stability and certainty to the world. Xi made the remarks during a meeting with European Council President Antonio Costa and European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen at the Great Hall of the People in Beijing. He underscored the need for China and the EU to strengthen communication, enhance trust and deepen cooperation in a more challenging and complex international situation, to provide more stability and certainty for the world through steady and sound China-EU relations. The meeting comes as the EU leaders visit Beijing for the 25th China-EU Summit, which coincides with the 50th anniversary of the establishment of diplomatic relations between China and the EU. Quote, China and the EU, both quote-unquote big guys in the international community, should keep their bilateral relationship growing in the right direction and work together to usher it into an even brighter next 50 years, end quote. She told EU leaders, noting that this year marks the 50th anniversary of China-EU diplomatic ties and the 80th anniversary of the United Nations. She said China-EU relations have come to another quote-unquote critical juncture in history. Over the past 50 years, China and the EU have achieved fruitful outcomes in exchanges and cooperation, delivering mutual success and worldwide benefits, he said. An important understanding and insight is that the two sides will respect each other, seek commonality while resolving differences, uphold openness and cooperation, and pursue mutual benefits, said Xi. These are also important principles and the right direction for China-EU relations in the future, he added. Faced with accelerating global transformation not seen in a century and a changing and turbulent world, Chinese and EU leaders should once again demonstrate vision and leadership and make the right strategic choices that will meet people's expectations and stand the scrutiny of history, said Xi. And there's a video, but I'm not going to read. President Xi Jinping calls for deeper China-EU cooperation. There's a subtitle. And says, 3 proposals for China-EU relations. For the future development for China-EU relations, she made 3 proposals. The first is to uphold mutual respect and strengthen partnership. He emphasized that despite differences in history, culture, systems, and development stages, this should not hinder the development of bilateral relations. He stated that China is a peace-loving country advocating for harmony, inclusiveness, cooperation, and win-win outcomes, and cannot be measured by the historical development experience of the West. He also pointed out that the current challenges the EU faces do not come from China. He said that there are no fundamental conflicts of interest or geopolitical contradictions between China and Europe, and the foundation of their relationship is based on cooperation outweighing competition, with consensus prevailing over differences. Well, what can I say about all this? People say that Europe is a vassal of the American Empire, and Europe capital flows are going away from are exiting Europe. So Europe is losing money, is losing money, is losing geopolitics. Anyway, it will be a hard century for Europe. It will be a hard decade for Europe. It will be a hard more 5 years ahead for Europe. The first is to uphold mutual respect and strengthen partnerships. He emphasized that despite differences in history, culture, systems, and development stages, this should not hinder the development of bilateral relations. He stated that China is a peace-loving country advocating for harmony, inclusiveness, cooperation, and win-win outcomes, and cannot be measured by the historical development experience of the West. Yeah, China is more interesting than that, is more complex than that. He also pointed out that current challenges the EU faces do not come from China. He said that there are no fundamental conflicts of interest or geopolitical contradictions between China and Europe, and the foundation of their relationship is based on cooperation outweighing competition, with consensus prevailing over differences. She stated that China consistently views China-EU relations from a strategic and long-term perspective, seeing Europe as an important pole in a multipolar world. China supports European integration and the EU's strategic autonomy, hoping Europe will respect China's chosen path, system, and core interests. Well, China is stronger now. China is stronger than Europe now. Xi's second proposal is for China and Europe to uphold openness and cooperation and properly manage differences. He said that boosting competitiveness should not rely on building walls or barriers, as decoupling and serving supply chains will only result in self-isolation, and that quote-unquote reducing dependency should not lead to a reduction in China-EU cooperation. He stressed that China-EU economic and trade relationship, which is complementary and mutually beneficial, can achieve dynamic balance through development. She also noted that China's high-quality development and opening up will provide new opportunities and potential for China-EU cooperation. He called and digital partnership and boost mutual investment and cooperation. It's hoped that the EU can remain open in the trade and investment market, refrain from using restrictive economic and trade tools, and foster a sound business environment for Chinese enterprises investing and operating in the EU, she stressed. The third proposal is to practice multilateralism and safeguard international rules and order. She stated that China and Europe should jointly uphold the international rules and order established after World War II and work together to create a more just and equitable global governance system. He called for cooperation on global challenges like climate change. He also expressed that China's commitment to resolving international disputes peacefully through political means, advocating for both dialogue and addressing the root causes. She said that China is willing to coordinate with Europe to ensure the success of the UN Climate Change Conference this year and to make greater contributions to combating climate change and global green transformation. Furthermore, China is eager to collaborate with Europe in the field of artificial intelligence, advancing equal, orderly world multipolarity and inclusive economic globalization. You know, I guess an article huge like this is diplomatic campaign. So China is willing to avoid the World War III against the US, and Europe is definitely a pivotal partner. So important to have good relations with Europe. Anyways, so let's go. The European side emphasized the significance of Xi's proposals for China-EU relations, noting that over the past 50 years, the scale and depth of cooperation between China and Europe have expanded, making them key partners in trade and cooperation. They praised China's development achievements, recognizing it as a manufacturing and technology powerhouse that has lifted hundreds of millions out of poverty. Europe expressed confidence in and support for China's further development. The European side also emphasized that China-EU relations are of great importance to both sides and the world, and the EU is committed to deepening the relationship constructively, managing differences, and ensuring the continued success of cooperation on a balanced, equal, and mutually beneficial basis. Furthermore, they said that the EU does not seek quote-unquote decoupling from China and welcomes Chinese investment in Europe. So, as I said, China doesn't want the World War III, and Europe is a key player in this war. In the face of a turbulent and uncertain world, the EU has stressed that China and Europe must shoulder responsibility together by upholding multilateralism, supporting the principles and purposes of the EU Charter, addressing global challenges such as climate change and promoting regional peace and stability. That was just the first one. There's a second set. China urges opposition to unilateral tariffs at WTO. There's an live update about Thailand and Cambodian conflict. The fourth says about Russia-Ukraine agree, about the Russia conflict in Ukraine. Look, they had a meeting in Turkey, in Istanbul. Ukraine and Russia, they made a meeting there. Nice. And lastly, the genocide in Gaza. I'm going to read the second one about WTO. China, July 24. China urges opposition to unilateral tariffs, defense of multilateral trading system at WTO. There's a file photo of a sign of the WTO seen at the headquarters in Geneva. China has called for opposition to unilateral tariff actions and the defense of the multilateral trading system at a two-day meeting of the World Trade Organization's WTO General Council, which concluded in Geneva on Wednesday. In a statement present at the meeting, the Chinese delegation noted that global trade turbulence is intensifying, marked by rising uncertainty and increased risks of fragmentation. In recent months, new unilateral tariff measures have continued to emerge, and the volume of trade affected by restrictive measures has reached $2.7 trillion, the highest level since statistics became available in 2009, the delegation said. Against this backdrop, the delegation called on WTO members to strengthen solidarity and cooperation and to more effectively support the multilateral trading system. The delegation elaborated on a three-pronged quote-unquote SDR framework previously proposed by China, namely, quote, stability as the cornerstone, development as the priority, and reform as the pathway, end quote. Noting that the proposed efforts include jointly upholding WTO principles such as the most favored nation MFN treatment and non-discrimination, supporting the integration of developing members into the multilateral trading system, and advancing in-depth WTO reform. The delegation stressed that bilateral agreements reached or related measures taken by relevant members to ease trade tensions must comply with WTO rules. The delegation also suggests that the WTO Secretariat strengthen its monitoring and analysis of unilateral measures and bilateral agreements, and promptly inform members of their impact, especially the potential negative spillover effects on third-party members. Brazil, the European Union, Australia, New Zealand, Russia, Venezuela, and other WTO members stated that at the meeting that is escalating trade turbulence is not in the common interest of members. Unilateral tariff measures, they noted, undermine the foundation of multilateral rules, significantly raise costs for businesses and consumers, and particularly hinder the economic growth and social development of vulnerable developing members. Given the current circumstances, they emphasize that upholding the multilateral trading system has become more critical than ever. And that's it. Sources: Xinhua News Agency. So, just top two.